And a very good afternoon to you. I'm Lisa Lord with the CBC News at noon. Desalination, that will be Barbados' answer to the drought conditions and water woes plaguing scores of rural communities across the island. Minister of Water Resource Management David Eswick outlined the short, medium and long-term strategy during an hour-long news conference at the Ministry of Agriculture headquarters a short while ago. He says the response will include the establishment of 2 new desalination plants proposed for the north of the island to manage the situation.
The plan is to use some of the CDB funds. They are now creating an abstraction well in that area, and that well, and they found over 160 feet of fresh water. That can give you, he's estimating, over close to a million gallons a day. That will now be sent by a main straight to Casa Grande, so that Casa Grande will be able to service St. Joseph. That will rectify that problem. Now, but if the drought continues, even that volume will start to diminish. That's the reason why the only true long-term mitigation for Barbados is to go to desalination.
And Dr. Eswick has described as unfortunate attempts to link the current water crisis Barbados is facing to politics. According to him, drought conditions are being felt across the Caribbean and not Barbados alone. Other countries affected include St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, and Trinidad and Tobago. He says that these nations have had to resort to water rationing. Dr. Eswick says Barbadians are also being misled by some politicians on the situation. Now, recently, the Barbados Labour Party called for rebates from the Barbados Water Authority for those affected customers.
Barbadian politicians have a greater responsibility than the average citizen to ensure that he or she is appropriately briefed and researched so that they can educate and guide their constituents when those constituents are faced with unusual and natural challenges that create emotional responses based on frustration and anger due to the inability, and in this situation, of the Barbados Water Authority to provide an uninterrupted potable water service in some parts of the country. This prolonged drought is affecting the entire Caribbean region. These drought conditions have created individual country water shortages problems that is severely affecting consumers and businesses and threaten national development in several Caribbean territories.
And Dr. Eswick revealed that 3 short-term solutions to the current crisis are currently being worked on to bring relief to those affected customers. Well, a man who robbed a female British visitor is currently in police custody. He was pursued and apprehended by a group of young men. Police say that the woman was attacked and robbed while walking on a section of the Richard Haynes Boardwalk in Hastings, Christchurch. The male perpetrator robbed her of valuables and a handbag. The items were recovered. Well, fire has slightly damaged a wall house in Lamins Park in St. Joseph. 12 fire officers under the command of Divisional Officer Ricardo Gittings responded to the blaze yesterday. The house is owned by 73-year-old Carlotto Williams. Some comforting words from Finance Minister Chris Sinclair that government has no plans to increase the value-added tax in other areas, and this follows the increase of VAT on mobile voice and data services at the start of this year to 22%. And he made the comment in an interview with the Government Information Service.
No, VAT will not increase. Certainly not under this administration. There is no contemplation to increase the VAT to 22%. You may find that in some instances, specific services may have a differential rate, as is this case. We did a differential rate for tourism, for example, because we lowered the rate on, say, direct tourism services from the standard 17.5 down to 7.5, and that was to give a boost to the tourism industry. And of course, we're seeing that happening now in the economy, the benefits of that in terms of the product offerings to the tourists. And we decided now to do an upper rate. But of course, as well, in tax practice, the standard generally is to keep the sub rates minimal.
The rate of unemployment in Barbados for July to September 2015 stood at 11.3%, with the unemployment rate among males being 12.8% and 9.7% among females. This is according to statistics derived from the Barbados Statistical Service's Continuous Household Labor Force Survey. In a review period, the number of persons employed totaled 128,400, while the total number of unemployed persons stood at 16,300. In total, the number of persons in the labor force stood at 144,600. The number of persons not actively looking for work, hence excluded from the labor force, was about 77,400 persons. And we'll have